Hey guys, welcome into the Shadow Box. I am Carlise, your host, your grief and trauma coach, and your shadow work guide. Today with us we have Clover Taylor Johnston. Clover is she's a co-parenting coach. She has her bachelor's from the University of West Indies and a master's degree in communication and public relations from the University of Stirling, which is in Scotland. Within her co-parenting coaching courses, she is driven in this direction by the unfolding of significant and unexpected life events, which I will hand this over to you, Clover. I want to thank you for coming in. I want to hand this over to you and just start to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, so as you said, I'm Clover Johnston. Our worlds intersected because of my experience with grief, especially disenfranchised grief.
Mhm.
So while I was going through it, I had no knowledge of what I was going through, besides knowing that I was suffering from deep heartbreak from the breakup of my marriage while I was still nurturing two infants.
Okay.
So I came into the world of disenfranchised grief, not by study, but by experience and survival. Very
Yeah.
important, survival, right? So my marriage started to unravel when I had a 5 week old baby and a 4 year old just ready for kindergarten. And in the midst of the worst tropical cyclone of the 20th century, which left the country of Jamaica where I was living totally devastated, roofs off. It was big, it was huge,
Yeah.
and it was devastating across the country. And what happened in my world was I had a husband then who had lost his job earlier that year. So there was decentering. I am analyzing backwards.
Hmm.
And people with whom careers form part of their identity and their success linked to that identity, it can really throw you off balance.
Yeah.
So then came, I at that time I was pregnant, so I was expecting a baby. Then um, he lost his job, right? So those are some significant life events. So
Definitely.
the baby,
Well, Clover, let's back up a little bit. Tell our audience what disenfranchised grief actually is.
absolutely. So disenfranchised grief is grief that is not openly acknowledged, it's not publicly mourned, and it is not socially supported. So the difference with grieving a death, a physical death,
Mm-hmm.
is that everybody, your phones don't stop ringing. Then there's a memorial service, which the close family and friends turn up, and you get that support, and you have a public farewell in which you are supported physically and you are supported morally and emotionally because people are sharing in the physical feeling of grief. There's empathy and it is demonstrated in their presence and connection and communication.
Right.
Disenfranchised grief, on the other hand, let me give some examples to help. So if we're very tied up in our careers and suddenly we lose our careers, or you lose a job that has been part of your identity for 20, 15 years, 25 years, when you lose that, you lose part of who you are.
Right.
In loss of an ex-spouse, people will wonder, why are you grieving that? It's in the past. In some cultures, grieving a pet, in my Jamaican culture, when my dog died and my daughter called me to tell me, and we were both crying, the average Jamaican would laugh at me and say, "What's wrong with you?" But I was in Canada. So people could empathize because of the love they share for their animals,
Right.
right? Another um, cultural peculiarity. the death of homosexuals in Jamaica is just not seen as something to mourn.
Oh wow.
Them
Okay.
for dead. That's the culture generally. The younger people are changing that, but that's the culture generally. Um,
Now that's interesting that you say that because I never knew that. So
mhm.
when we think about culture, right? We think about the community as a whole, right? So within certain cultures, when there's a perspective that follows that nature, it's again as a whole. So my question is it just the community that doesn't grieve the homosexuals, or is it their actual families and the outside community as well?
Okay, so the actual families are enveloped by shame
Okay.
if they know about it, generally speaking. But the external community is literally hostile, especially as I said, I think it's changing in the generation under 35. But I have known of communities where homosexuals have gone, especially in rural Jamaica, to live, and they have literally been attacked once they have been found out.
Okay. But the
So
families
the
still,
last
do the families still hold memorial services for them, or are they not allowed to?
Oh yes, that is that I think no, that is still held, but it's under the cloud of shame. So you're not going to get crowds coming out for that
Hmm.
at all
Got it. Okay. Thanks for explaining that
once
to
it's
me.
known. Yeah. So stigmatized grief also when somebody dies from like suicide,
Mhm.
an overdose, or the person suffered with ongoing mental health issues. Again, in many societies, including the one I'm from, they see it as a relief that the person is gone.
Mm. Okay.
And again, this is gradually changing because mental health issues are being viewed very differently from how they were viewed 30 and 40 years ago. Because
Yeah.
in Jamaica, there was not enough care for mental health. It was when they were in the acute stage that people just recognize them as being crazy and they need to be off the streets. So there was no in between, there was no primary care, and there still isn't a lot of primary care. But because of the increase in the number of psychiatrists and families being way more aware, the level of ignorance is not as great as what it used to be. So there is more receptivity and the willingness to point them to where they should go and for families to take responsibility for helping to point them in that direction.
Wow. Okay. That's really
So those are some of the incidences
yeah.
of stigmatized.
And
Um,
when you were talking about your husband and him coming out of his career, or kind of losing his job, and him being caught up, his identity being caught up in his career, which of course kind of made him behave in certain ways or project himself out in certain ways. Now we go to you with, like you said, it was a devastating heartbreak. You were also having identity crisis as well because you had been married to this man, plus you were having a child, and you had to shift your identity to become just one again, right? Plus a mother. Tell us a little bit about that identity shift and how you grieved yourself in that space.
okay, so my greatest pain in processing my grief at that time was grieving the loss of the father I imagined my children would have and the family life that we would all share together.
Got it.
And the reason why that was extremely huge for me, I proudly tell people that I am from, my parents are deceased now, but I was from a traditional nuclear family with married parents who were married for over 52 years and who reflected love and care in their household, not only for their children, but for the extended family.
Okay.
So I got that example and I had that template to work on that says children come first.
Mm.
And no matter what is happening, they didn't ask to come here. So you therefore now have to position yourself to be a source of nurture. So, with that family background and socialization, that became my focus. So, my grief was hugely wrapped up in the absence of the father I imagined that they would have. And it was even deeper because I had a 5 week old when they started to unravel. By the time it completed unraveling, she was almost 5 months. And the question that kept coming to me repeatedly, what are you going to tell this child? That her father disappeared? I had no answers. And that was where it dug deep into me.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine what I was going to tell her when she found out, because it is almost abhorrent for somebody to walk out on a child who is biologically yours.
Yeah.
All right? It is absolutely abhorrent. I always remember the Shakespeare line: "The innocence often of pure the 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 innocence often of pure childhood,
Yeah.
persuades when speaking fails." And so for me, that was where my grief was. It was less about for me because I had an identity that was already wrapped up in a family. And
Mm,
yes, we became one when we got married. So yes, I was somebody's wife. But essentially, I could eventually pivot to becoming who I was meant to be on my own,
yeah.
with my own talents, skills, and abilities, because I was always driven to be um, the one who is always looking to up level and to becoming the best version of myself. So even before I got married, I had crafted loosely a plan of my own professional growth. So that was where I was in deep pain and deep grief. It was how would this affect and impact my children when I was hoping for a father daughter relationship that mirrored the one I had with my own dad, which was one of love and care and banter, and just, we knew that we love each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You
that's what I
know,
had to mourn deeply.
and I wonder, not wonder, but I want to ask, in your parents' marriage, was it based off of love? And when you went into your marriage, was your marriage based off of love? And I'm asking because I know that your identity was in your career and that you came from a well rounded and grounded family, which you weren't going into a relationship with someone looking for identity, right? You weren't looking for someone to make you into a wife. So um, when you say, I have this particular identity, what was the basis of you getting married to that man to have a family?
Okay, I think the basis of all of us getting married is that we think we're in love, and for everyone, love means something different. Growing up, what I saw as love was acts of service,
Got it.
and that you are working together as a unit. It's not the passion and the hot flashes and whatever else. That's not it. It's about the care, the mutuality of care and service that we give others, and that I am in it and I have your back. And that will always be the case. That's what I saw in my parents, even in the tough times, whether it was illness, whether it was financial distress, they would never um, you know, give up on each other.
Yeah.
So that's what it looked like for me. And so erroneously, I went in the relationship looking much for the same. And then this is something that I must say, and I don't know how it affects other people's marriages, but I was too inexperienced to recognize this particular fact that had an impact. So I was from a traditional nuclear family. He grew up with a father initially and a stepmother with whom he claimed that it was not a good relationship. The stepmom and him loved his father, and his father loved him. right? However, his father died when he was 16 years old. Then he went to live with his mom, who was by now married to somebody else. And I'm told by a family member who lived with him and lived in the household that he didn't give that stepfather a chance for the opportunity to work because he had that bad taste in his mouth from the first stepmom relationship. And so he carried that over. So he was operating with some level of buried pain that I was too inexperienced to recognize. And I'm not sure, even if I recognize it, I could fix it, short of telling him to go to counseling.
Yeah.
And in many cultures, and depending on who you are and your level of education, people are still reluctant to seek therapy and counseling.
Right.
So I'm not sure. But I want to point out I eventually realized that was a huge point of difference. And I think oftentimes, sometimes, even a little point of jealousy, so to speak.
Hmm. Okay. And kind of expand on that. The jealousy in what fashion? How did you see that
I
play out?
think in terms of thinking that you are paid too much attention by your family and they will respond to your needs once it happened. And I knew after the breakup that was felt even more. And
Yeah.
I will just give you an example. I remember my mom had come back to stay with me because I was going back to work after maternity leave.
Hmm.
So he had free access. I never blocked him from coming and visiting the kids. And apparently, he sat with my mother a couple of times. And I'll never forget this because this is all part of the grief that, you know, still was on the tail end. He told my mother had loaned me her car just to make life a little easier. And he told my mom that he was dying for the day when she took back her car so my friends could laugh at me.
Oh.
And I found that horrifying
Yeah.
because I am the primary caregiver and the source of nurture for your children. Why would you want to see that happen? And so my disenfranchised grief lived for a long time because of, you know, feelings like that I
Right.
came across. And so I'm also going to just extend our little discussion
Yeah.
because, to be fair, I had another long term relationship, much longer,
Hmm.
where I had a third daughter. And I think my season of disenfranchised grief was even longer.
Hmm.
And I'm going to see if I can tell it in a quick chronological order.
Okay.
So my daughter was born. We were in a relationship. It was a very long term relationship. And I remember when she was born, he said to me, I'll make sure she's fed, I'll make sure she goes to school, but I'm not contributing to the rent because she's too small. She doesn't take up any space.
Oh, wow.
But here's what happened. I listened because by then I had graduated and advanced emotionally from the experience of my marriage. And I now had firmly fixed a growth plan, my professional growth plan. And so I said, okay, this is good that I have this plan because I am going to work it because, I'm not going to relive that season of life
Right.
and the hardships, especially the financial hardships. So I listened. I looked after my daughter. I paid for her delivery. I remember something that life had taught me was that I worked with the government then. So um, I had started a ham project, which starts around November because of the demand for ham.
Okay.
And so between November and December, I would sell maybe 300 to 500 pounds of ham.
Okay.
And I would have that money basically set aside to tide me over from December to January because we always got paid early in December. And you know what happens with Christmas. So there's always a vacuum. So that became
Hmm.
my go-to income earning stopgap for that season. So I remember when she was born, I paid for it from that because I just was not going to be arguing with anybody to disturb my peace. And
Right.
so at 5 years old, she went to kindergarten. So I remember he paid for that. But that was in January because she became the January 5. Luckily for me, by the end of August, I was leaving. My one of my biggest dreams and the most life altering of all my plans came when I decided to go to the University of Stirling to study.
Okay.
And so this 5 year old, who I didn't even know would be eligible for school over there, and my 13-year old, my now 17-year old, was at the end of high school, and she wanted to finish her final year. So off we went, and I remember saying to myself, the minute that plane lifted, and it lifted way in the night, somewhere between 9 and 10 o'clock, I felt an emotional ton of weight lift off of me. Like,
Yes.
girl, you did it. You did it. And so when I arrived in Scotland, I arrived with all positive expectations. I didn't
Mhm.
know what I was facing. This was what you call blind faith. And so I encourage anybody who is struggling. Yes, there is a thing as blind faith.
Yeah.
And so I borrowed from the credit union half of my school fee and half of my accommodation. That was the sum total of what I had.
Okay.
And I remember at the time, the bank was actually short on pounds. So luckily for me, I had a friend who was working at the bank, and she said, I'm coming up shortly to England. I will bring it for you. So I went, and luckily, school had started for the kids because they start school the last week in August. But school didn't start for me until I think it was the beginning of the second week of September. So I lived in a freshers' hall in a warden's flat. And so we had a reception area which was manned by porters. And there was this wonderful man who was the head porter. And he came to me and said, how old is the little girl? The younger of the two. And I
Mhm.
said, she's 5. And he said, oh, I am going to give you a number. And if you call the Stirling Council, there is a minibus that comes in here and takes the children to school right at the doorway and brings them back, as long as the children are between 5 to 9.
Okay.
He says, that's available to you. So I'm going to give you the number, you inform them. And for the older one, they will send you a bus pass so she rides free and back to and school, to and fro from school. So that was another cause for celebration because I'm
Yeah.
saying back in Jamaica, I was paying for this. They were not coming on time, sometimes making me late for work. So that was another celebration for me. And
Mhm.
the icing on the cake was, so this was August, so it's in the fall. It's still nice and, you know, still not cold by British standards. And so the kids are immediately adjusted, and I'm just not understanding it. I didn't think the 5 year old had words to explain it, but she was just going through the motions, going along. But the 13-year old, after about a month, I said to her, I cannot believe the difference I see in you. And I'm wondering, what's happened? And at 13 years old, she said to me, I am rid of the emotional burden of my
Mhm.
father. And I was beyond shocked.
Yeah.
And the school in which she had spent her first year as well, first year of high school, it was so different from the elementary school that she was coming from. There was just a wider mix of kids,
Yeah.
and so she was just not accustomed to the rough and tumble.
Mhm.
So it really worked out. So all of us got an all round emotional lift.
Yeah.
And for me, life altering in the sense that a black woman with a from a third world country with a third world passport came to realize that it doesn't matter how smart you are, even if that is recognized, your education is never seen with the same equivalence unless it comes from a British university, an American university,
Mm.
or a Canadian university. And that's just a fact of life
Yeah.
that I learned as a Black woman.
Yeah.
And that cemented my desire to facilitate that for my children.
Yeah.
So for me, in that stream, in that lane of my goals, there was no turning back.
Yeah.
And for me, that was hugely fulfilling.
Yeah. Now,
Unfortunate.
what would you say that your so all of the fear that you kind of had prior to leaving Jamaica, and you were grieving the life that your children were going to have, because even you grieved the first time, and I'm pretty sure you were kind of grieving the second time around of you leaving and going into a different country or different state. That fear within that emotional upheaval had to dissipate as well, because the what you thought your children were going to feel, they actually didn't. And so you anticipated a certain grief that didn't happen, um, and which I would think helped you cope with your grief, or even just get rid of it altogether. How did you start coping with that, or how did that unfold for you?
Oh yes, you're absolutely right. What happened for me, as I said, I felt an emotional lightness,
Hmm.
because I saw my children thriving. I saw them just going through the motions. I saw them yearning to go to school, excited to go to school. That in itself was just, it was just so uplifting for me. And there was I getting on with what I hoped would push me along professionally in life, not just professionally, but personally, because it's building your competencies. And when you become competent at something, it reflects in who you are and your identity. And I remember one day one of my classmates saying to me, "Oh, you are so confident." And I'm saying, we were doing a group project. And I'm saying, I wonder why, in my mind, I'm saying, I wonder why I would say that. And he said it, loudly and with conviction. And I'm saying, well, thanks for that. But so absolutely, that's why I said it was a life altering season of my life, in my personal, parental role, and also in my professional role. So it definitely gave me that lightness. It removed the spirit of heaviness, and it proved that while I was planning and doing it afraid, that you can't be constrained by fear. You just cannot
Yeah.
be constrained by fear. In the same way that when a relationship ends, you don't know what's on the other side for you.
Yeah.
It could be a
It's all
better
unfamiliar.
relationship,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right. So I have no fear of the unknown. For me, it has always proven to work for me. But let me just go back a bit now to so at the end of the time in Scotland, the father of my third child had been coming to visit, but still
Hmm.
no regular child support, right? None at all. And in fact, when he came, it was more about his personal shopping and maybe a bit of shopping for her.
Hmm.
However, here is where my disenfranchised grief started again.
Okay.
So I am bonded to the government of Jamaica because I got mostly paid study leave. And he called up and said to me, I can't marry somebody who is living abroad. And I had started looking for jobs over there, albeit I started too late. Had I started maybe 6 or more months before, my life would have been different in terms of relationship. Anyway, he says to me, um, yes, I can't marry somebody who is living overseas. And knowing that he was never generous, and in terms of his childcare responsibilities, financially, I'm speaking now,
Yeah.
um, it was suboptimal at best. So I said to him, what are your expectations of my financial input? Which I thought was a fair question based on the track record of the man. And he said to me, oh, all the bills are being paid. You're not required to pay anything. I accepted that with a grain of salt. I I accepted that with a grain of salt. However, here's what was funny because I remember when it was actual time now to buy the plane tickets, and I should have seen this huge red flag. In fact, a whole sheet.
Yeah.
He sent exact money for the child. He didn't send anything for me, right? My older one wasn't coming back because she was en route to Canada now. She was at the end of high
Mm.
school. Anyway, I found my way and we went back to Jamaica. That's the tail end
Mm.
of that summer. I was ill. I had been diagnosed with rock bottom hemoglobin levels and H.
Mm.
pylori um, virus in my stomach.
Yeah.
So I needed further investigation, upper GI endoscopy, etc. So it was now late August, and I wanted her to be home in time to get into school because you just want a smooth transition.
Right.
So I got home, got her into school, and then started focusing on my health. Now, when I got home, things looked a bit paltry. Um, it's a nice home, nothing is wrong with that, but it just looked like there are certain elements that needed care. And with all of what was happening, he had earned a seven-figure payout from his company redundancy before I left. He bought himself a Mercedes Benz. He had thrown himself 100,000 birthday party. So for what we were coming back to, it looked very paltry.
Yeah.
He had a son who was also in college in Jamaica. He had bought him a $500,000 Mitsubishi Lancer to go to school, where he could have bought him 100,000 Suzuki Swift. So there were some real question marks
Yeah.
when I saw, the general situation in the house. But I decided I would be an observer and I would just try to give it a chance. But of course, my disenfranchised grief is kicking in again. So I look at my health and I said, he's now in a job, not as prestigious as the ones before, and significantly less income earning. However, you could have still got a health plan. That's just should be part of your planning. So I return. There's no health planning. What I needed to do at the time was going to cost me 75,000, and
Mm.
I'm not even back at work yet.
Yeah.
So I had bought a charter ticket, luckily for me. So about 2 weeks later, I called up the charter company and asked them if I would be allowed to go back on the return leg. They say, yes, sir, but I have to pay a penalty. And I went back, sorted my issues out, got my upper GI endoscopy, got clearance, came back with a treatment plan, and so went back to work. It is now December of the year. We're now almost a week from Christmas. And Christmas is one time, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. You feel Christmas. You spend,
Hmm.
it's different. And I have lived that all my life.
Yeah.
I looked under the Christmas tree because he was somebody for lots of decoration. The banister must be decorated, the Christmas tree. So he's big on that. But when I looked under the tree, there were 3 bottles of liquor and nothing for anybody else. And those were given to him
Wow.
by the contractors of the company.
Yeah.
And he said to me, this was one that made my hair stand on end because he knew that I was just back at work. I had negotiated $1 million Jamaican dollar loan to pay off my what I had owed the university
Hmm.
for my accommodation, etc. And he looks at me after being told that you wouldn't be required to pay any bills, I'm paying everything, that the electricity bill is due, and in his typical Jamaican Creole, you have to pay it. And I said, I haven't got any money. All I've got is my credit card. That didn't matter. He took me to the to where they accept the payment, and I paid it. And so, as you can imagine, they're begun. But that was just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Unknown to me, he was in and out of another relationship. And
Okay.
this person that he was in the relationship did not take, apparently, the fact that he must have said to her, well, it's over because of whatever.
Hmm.
So again, it's now It's now Christmas time, and I hear somebody shouting on the landline to him. And she turns up at the gate, but I am not going to entertain any communication or contact on that. So he goes out, only to find out that, by the following year, he's in and out, more in than out of a relationship. And he's actually, she was in the decorating business, and he joins her, he says, to make money. All right?
Okay.
I can laugh now, but I'm telling you, this was
Yeah.
a prolonged period of disenfranchised grief.
Yeah.
And as my daughter grew up, and this is the hard part because she recently told me about how much it upset her, that um, he actually made her aware of it. He had ceased being discreet, especially the times when I was traveling.
Mhm. Yeah.
And she actually confronted him and asked him, "Are you cheating?" And she said he didn't respond.
Mm.
And so, anyway, by the next year, collection letters for credit card, um, the house, he comes home one day, and this one is big for me because this one impacted me tremendously. So, because of how he was living his financial planning, his house mortgage was never up to date.
Okay.
So he came home one day and said, "Oh, the house is advertised for auction." So I said, "What?" So he showed it to me in the paper. So the fool that I was, I said to him, "Okay, I will lend you the money," because it was 3 months. So at that time, it was 2009, so 100,000 Jamaican dollars, a lot of money at that time.
Hmm.
So my bank was directly opposite the building society. So I went, and I still have the check stub.
Hmm.
Anybody challenges me. So I brought home the check, gave it to him, 100,000 paid for 3 months mortgage. The mortgage was just under 30,000 at the time. And so that settles that. But as my daughter got older, he took on the school fees, which are actually the cheapest part of her education because
Hmm.
it was a yearly fee. It was a yearly fee, and most of the books were booked rental. Um, but I eventually had to basically cover the food bills, cover we had a mother's help, so cover her pay, and mostly cover like the telephone, internet, and so
Yeah.
forth. If not, I wouldn't have it. If not, I wouldn't have had it. So I went through that season now of what I call straight up financial exploitation. And I remember again another one that I would never forget. Thieves had broken into the home and they had stolen her little notebook that I had bought for her previously. And
Mm.
it was the year that she was getting ready to take exams. So she needed a new computer. So I went and I checked, got the costing for a computer for her. At the time it was 65,000. And so I said to him, "All right, let's split this in half." And it was agreed in principle. The day when I was to go and collect it and pay for it, he looked at me and told me, "But you just got your partner draw." Now, a partner draw is a traditional, you have it in America, but it's a traditional kind of way in which people save. So,
Okay.
say you have 10 people, everybody gives 5,000 a month. And when it's your turn, you would get 50,000. And so it goes around for 10 months until it
Okay.
expires and you start. So he was actually measuring, my income. And I
Yeah.
found that, again, I just said, I'm not going to argue. This is for my child. And I am seeing an exit plan. And so I had to sit in that for almost 6 years,
Mm.
waiting on my exit plan.
Yeah.
Womanizing, financial exploitation. No matter what I did, it wasn't good enough. He was just there telling me what his friends' wives are doing for them.
Yeah.
I'm sure he never told them that I facilitated him getting a degree and all of that kind of thing. But be that as it may, faith is always my backup tool.
Hmm.
And so I said the Lord delivered me and took me through that period with my ex husband. he's going to do the same. God doesn't change.
Yeah, definitely. And Clover, we're so you came through these relationships, you have your children, you are now a single mother, and it's almost like you were a single mother the whole time throughout both
Absolutely.
relationships, right? And so this kind of came, this is how you birthed your co-parenting coaching business, or even started the thought process on it. So walk us through your three V's and how that ties into how you ended up um, co-parenting with, or the lack of co-parenting with your children's father.
All right, so here's what grief can do to you. Grief, like heartbreak, can allow you to turn inwards, to isolation, and to shame, right?
Okay.
I am not accepting the moral decline of anybody and owning it as my own. It's not mine to own. What is mine to own is the response that I have to this.
Hmm.
And because my children were my motivation and driving force, because I brought them here, I recognize that I had to, um, faith was my life raft to get me through this. And I had to be swimming and swimming and swimming and making sure that they got to shore and that we didn't all drown.
Right.
Now, for those people who wallow in shame, it's not a tool of growth, but it's a tool of disconnection. So, during COVID, in that respite period when initial shutdown, I went into deep retrospection,
Okay.
extremely deep, about my life experiences, what I had accomplished, um, what worked, and all of that.
Right.
And there was a little voice that said to me, I had recently returned from China after 5 years, because that was the answer to prayer that the Lord gave me so that I could pay for my last child's college education in Canada. So in that season, it said, the little voice said, what is it that you would have liked to have had more of and you didn't get? And I said, co-parenting, a word I don't know where it came from.
Hmm.
But that was where I landed. And I said, yes, that's exactly. Can you imagine? I mean, there's a friend of mine that says to me all the time, look how much you accomplished on your own. Can you imagine if you had a real husband? I always laugh when she says that. Yeah. So I said to myself, yeah, this is exactly. And I said, you know what? People expect you, because I know after, living across the world, by now I'd lived different periods in the US, I mean, temporarily. I'd gone to China for 5 years. So I had a lot, the UK, I got a lot of cultural exposure.
Got it.
And I just said to myself, women hang on to this shame and think it's a life raft. And they do themselves no service by hanging on to it.
Right.
And so maybe I need to go and validate the feelings of these women, that that really crafts a new narrative, that you are not responsible for somebody else's indiscretion or their lack of responsibility. You have to own what you are responsible for and work on it, but not for the other person. And so, big voice, big personality, lots of life experience. This is a huge group of women out there, and we all need cheerleaders and we all
Yeah.
need validation. And I survived and thrived because of my personal and professional development plan, but because of the inner circle or Whoville that came to my rescue, of family
Hmm.
and friends.
Yeah.
So I want to be this voice of leadership in this space of single and divorced moms who are struggling with the shame and not getting the co-parenting support, to say to them, you can only be a mom, but you can't be a mom and a dad.
Hmm.
And so own your responsibility, own your position, craft how you want to show up. I decided that my model would be routines, stability, and showing up
Mm. Okay.
because I know that that was within my control. The
Right.
chaos on the other side, I have no control over. And the fact that these men thought that they were more important and their egos than their role as fathers, I cannot shift that narrative and that misplaced identity. All right. So I wanted to be that voice
Yeah.
that tells women you are not broken, you are okay, you just need healing because what you went through is trauma. It's child abuse because when a man doesn't pay his way, it's child abuse. When he doesn't show up for shared parenting time, it's child abuse. So, in as much I was suffering disenfranchised grief, I was suffering it because of the level of child abuse that was manifesting through their fathers.
Right.
Because if I did what the fathers had done, I would have been called out for
Right.
child abuse. That's just the facts of the case. So I just want women out there to recognize that you own your responsibility and you set the terms and conditions of your parenting, you own them and you operationalize them. You cannot take ownership of what is happening on the other side. But in as far as it's possible, cooperation should be the name of the game.
Yeah. And Clover, as you're talking about this, and even as a woman who has been divorced, and my son is now 23, we most of the time, we as women are so caught up in the emotional upheaval of the divorce and the falling out of things and the family not working and how are we going to do this, and then the stressors of raising the children and the stressors of the whatever we're experiencing with the ex-husband or what have you,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like you don't I for one, I, as much as I knew I needed to continue to keep going and
Mm-hmm.
working, and it strengthened me in a way, because not taking care of my child was never an option, right? Or us just being out was just never an option. But to be able to strategize in such a controlled and organized way, in the way that you are presenting it, was never, I think my mind was too frazzled, right? A lot of women's minds are too frazzled to even organize it in that way, right? And so I think that you doing what you're doing and giving women the education and giving women the understanding that there is space that can be created for you to think clearly, for you to move clearly, for you to strategize, not only for your own pain, but for the pain of, or the betterment of your children, right? The future, the next steps, the motion of your children. So
Mm-hmm.
I really just admire that you came up with this and are actually putting it in works, because it is absolutely needed. If I had it back then, and if I was in the frame of mind to utilize it, I could have saved myself a ton of chaos.
I think what happened to me that ultimately pushed me to stay the course and just focus, 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 maybe focus like an ambulance driver,
Yeah.
was that it was so there was so much irresponsibility on the other side that if I was gonna spend my time beating up over there, if I'd lived in the US or Canada, where you can garnish wages and all of that kind of thing, a less intrusive way of accountability.
Hmm.
But that wasn't an option for me here. So, yes, it did cause me overwhelm. I'm not going to lie about that. It was overwhelming, especially, I would say, in the first 10 years of the lives of my first two children. The third one, the years 5 to 10, we were in Scotland where I was getting a lot of support and life was just different, socially, emotionally, different ethos.
Hmm.
And so that made a huge difference. But I think what happens to all of us is that we have to learn to look within rather than looking outside for validation, for self development. We have to dig deep and say, who am I? What are my skills and talents and abilities? Who was I before I met this guy? And if he had died, what would have been my options, right?
Mhm.
So I did all of that. And I think I got to a place with both of their fathers where I almost feel a sense of ridicule of them. I'm being perfectly honest. Because they were so focused on material validation, owning this, owning that, who my brother is, who my friend is. Their markers of validation indicated to me that they had huge levels of insecurity
Mhm.
that they themselves had not come to terms with. And so I realized I had to do it.
Yeah.
So don't stay looking within. Reach out, build community. You are not alone. One in two marriages almost now are ending in divorce and separation.
Yeah.
So there is community out there,
Yeah.
and there are people out there like me who are cheering you on and encouraging you. And what has happened to me is that I have found purpose. That day when that little voice said, "What didn't you get enough of?" That was the golden nugget that was birthing my purpose, even though I didn't know it then. Because I just got up and was on this challenge and started doing Facebook Lives just out of boredom and just as a hobby. And
Yeah.
here I am today giving regular advice, being on numerous podcasts, and literally cheering women on. But most important, my purpose has pulled me outwards, and I had long left that inward bound scenery.
Okay.
So my purpose has pulled me outwards, and it's allowing me to connect with the tribe, I call them, of women are walking the journey that I have already walked. And so this not only I'm not only hoping to relieve somebody else's pain, but when I remember this situation years ago. There was a woman whose son was killed by a drunk driver. And she started this organization, I believe it was called MAD, Mothers for Drunk Driving,
Hmm.
or something like that.
Yeah.
And I wondered why, but she found her voice. And that's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah.
I, big personality, big voice, and I have found my voice, and I'm a cheerleader for a tribe of women who need validation. You are not broken. You didn't do anything wrong. Parenting is a joint call, a joint cause, and you have to show up as the best version of yourself. And you are not going to get that from your ex. So you are going to have to hone your skills and find and dig deep within. And what is mostly edifying for me and absolutely uplifting is that the personal intersects with the collective. And when that happens, you feel that you are delivering influence, you're delivering impact, and that somebody who is traveling the journey that I have traveled will hear what I'm saying and be encouraged and not to let go and not to let those negative shame scripts
Hmm.
and little gremlins that whisper in our ears, "You'll never get through this alone. You know, you're going to go it alone. It will never happen. It will never get better." I am telling you, that's a lie. It's a lie, and you need not bite.
Yeah.
What
And
you need is
no, go ahead.
what you need is a plan, and we don't automatically think like that.
Hmm.
We have to wait till the dust clears and the tears clear up.
Yeah.
But ultimately, when you get out of that initial season, you say, what is it that works or can work for me? Look at your talents and abilities. Is the job that you're doing too stressful? The one that I was doing, I was in banking when my marriage broke up. I knew I couldn't stay. I actually even got a better job offer at the time, and I had to decline it, explaining that emotional overwhelm, it was just too much. And I knew that I would have been fired from the job. And
Yeah.
as I raised this point, I just want to validate the importance of breakup as trauma. That there are companies in the UK, I don't know about the US, that are now employing divorce coaches to support
Mhm.
people who are going through the season of life because it
Interesting.
is hugely devastating. And because for many of us, I talked about disenfranchised grief already, and it
Hmm.
can be a long season.
Yeah.
And people will tell you, oh, you should get over it by then. There is no timeline for getting over your pain because pain and grief, they loop, they come in waves, and you have relapses.
Yeah.
And even the issue of closure, I sometimes grapple with that. That while we try to get closure sometimes on different issues, especially if you have had children, is that that closure sometimes may never come
Hmm.
because you get re-triggered over time from the graduations, the christenings, the weddings, all of these things.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a friend who, her husband and his wife, who caused the breakup of the marriage, wanted to sit in the front row of the daughter's wedding. And they had to be told that that was reserved for her mother. So,
Mhm.
can you imagine a mother going through that? She's just re-triggered,
Yeah.
and it's the same. So you have to work on your healing and put yourself in a place of coping, because the coping is a part of your healing, because these situations are going to come,
Yeah.
right? The father of my second child is now, I picked this up, that there is a narrative that is being sort of circulated about him being from a better family kind of
Mhm.
thing than I was from. Now, whether or not he believes that, that's fine, because his family is not the father of the child. He's the man with the shortcomings who didn't live up to the role of fatherhood in the way that he should have. And I'll end with this example of the triggering. So it's now 2015. I take her. Um, I take her to. I come back from China to take her to Canada, and I remember as her exams were finished, she called me. Those were the days of Skype, and she's howling. She's howling, and I'm saying, "Wonder if somebody died." And she said, "Mom, Daddy's saying that last year summer you took me immediately as exams are finished, and he thought I was going to do the same because he doesn't want to have to introduce anybody new to me." And I was beyond horrified.
Mhm.
And she said to me, "I am depressed." And I said, "Okay." She said she had called a relative of mine and asked him if he could give her a holiday job. And so she would move down and stay with them and do the holiday job, which is exactly what she did. And I am just telling that we have to have coping mechanisms
Yeah.
for, because it is almost as if sometimes the closure goes on and on. And when you think it's gone, right? I'd come to terms with the fact that, he had agreed that he would pay X towards that first year of upkeep for her. And, in the end, oh, your mother is earning Canadian dollars. She asking for books. Oh, your mother is earning Canadian dollars. And so whatever was to come, it didn't come as a regular commitment. It came whenever he felt like. And so in the end, I was left in a deficit position.
Yeah.
But
And
What
that's
a
a lot.
surprise.
And that's a lot of what, people do not think about coming out of these situations. And when you go through that grieving process of the divorce, of the treatment, of all of the things, you do come out grateful on the other side, right? Because you do see that, you see your strength, you see your capabilities, you see different parts of yourself that was buried or that you never came into.
Hmm.
That was kind of buried under survival, right? So now you know not only how to survive, but you get this processing and this ability to produce and this
Hmm.
ability to start to live, right? And sometimes
Absolutely.
for a lot of us, it may take a little bit longer than others, or some people may just kind of get it and pick up on it. But I think the most important part of it is just getting it. And when you get it, you need to roll with it, right? At whatever point that you pick up the ball, just start bouncing it. And so I think that definitely your coaching business and just your thought processing is going to help so many women. And I know you're already helping a lot of women just with this, and even the men too. Men are learning from these things as well. The ones who are open to receive this information to learn how to do it right, because it's not about you anymore. It's about that child. And if men and women, especially women, can come out of the emotional processing of it all, because I think that's what keeps us bound for so long. You come out of the
Absolutely.
emotional process of it all, then you can properly step back and really build the foundation for yourself and your children, right?
Absolutely.
So, Clover, I thank you so much. Tell us how to get in contact with you, and just what are some things that we should look forward to in the near future.
Okay, so I am on Facebook. Um, so you can see me there on my personal profile. So Clover Johnston. I am also on Instagram, co-parenting coach Clover, and you can send me a DM there or email me at johnston.clover@gmail.com. Now, what you can look forward to is that I am starting Clover's Co-Parenting Connect on Zoom. So before this week ends, I will be talking about it both on Facebook and on Instagram to invite you to a sort of a Q&A style workshop where you can ask your questions and get them answered. And from there, if you're interested in my coaching program, I'm going to be putting out a CTA soon as well, to offer you that opportunity.
Awesome. Well, and everything that Clover is offering, her links, her courses, everything that she just mentioned will be under her bio in the podcast area. So you'll be able to get in contact with her. And there's so much divorce going on, so many, and not even necessarily just only divorce, but people who are just having children with each other and need to learn how to co-parent, right? Who are coming from different sides of life, and they need to come together for the goodness of the child. And there's a lot of single women out there who need to know how to process this and strategically strategize a plan for their children, right? And themselves. So I thank you again, Clover, for coming into the shadow box and sharing this information with us. Everyone else, thank you for coming into the shadow box and just sitting with us and just learning some new things from Clover. We really appreciate it. Until next time, namaste.